live.
Right. So we'll go to item 2 on the agenda, which is agenda review and the minutes review. Does anybody have anything to add to the agenda today, or any corrections or additions to the minutes? I think everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes in their packet. Right? Okay. Anything for good of the order? Any changes?
Move to approve minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's been approved. And now we're moving on to item 3. And then we're gonna turn it over to Ethan.
Great.
Our status update on our priority bills out of the legislature, which is getting ready to wrap up soon.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Evans. So before you is the memorandum priority items from our Eugene State legislative priorities. And this is also just a condensed form of the email that I sent out on Monday. And so I'll walk through these. These are our top 4 items, the city's top 4 items over the course of this short session. And as we've been tracking, and I apologize, I was waiting to finish this and then printed it on out. And so it was a 26 to 3 vote
Great.
on the Senate chamber. So,
Good stuff.
so yep, House Bill 4136, and it includes 1.3 million for basic life support ambulance that will be utilized for 2 years, funding for 2 years. And then also Lane County received 3.2 million for innovation pilot programs. One of the really interesting things that Chief Heppel was updating me on is that in his work with Peace Health, they are actually bringing money to the table for a nurse navigation program, which he previously talked about, and which the county ideally will put an RFP on out for. And so we'll be, and we, during the kind of early session negotiations, I think Chief Caven will be able to support, will be helping as they write through the RFP. And so that it's something that we will be engaged with and aligns with some of the programs that we're looking for. And then Peace Health bringing dollars to the table as well as the city of Eugene, and it's got some funds that we would put there. So it's pretty exciting about what is on the horizon for innovation improvements to the EMS system, cost saving measures, and then being able to pilot those on out and then share those learnings across the state with other EMS fire districts. So then
That's great.
yeah, good news.
I know you can't, predict this. You don't have the crystal ball for this, but do we have local providers that can come in and bid on this nurse navigation program contract? Are we looking at a broader ask across, the region or the country for a provider to come in and provide those services?
Yeah, Councilor Evans, Chair Evans, excuse me. Yes, I think that's a great question. And my response is that, anytime that the city of Eugene, or Lane County, or any public agency puts out a request for proposal, we must follow the guidance that are in state statute related to public contracting laws. And then we adopt those at the local level and implement those. And so in this instance, it's less about location based, and more than likely it will be about service provision. And so if there's a local company, a state company, one in the Pacific Northwest, those will all be considered. But I think what the RFP, the core part of the RFP, will be what the services that are provided, and then obviously costs, responsibility. So there's a number of different criteria that are within that public contracting procurement process. And so I think that will be how they administer that.
I know the county has built in some, preference language for local providers or contractors on a number of their projects. I'm just asking because I just kind of intuitively think that if we have a local contractor that knows the community, it's better than having somebody in New Jersey that's, you know, providing, although people in New Jersey can provide remote, services, there are, there are advantages to having somebody you can put your hands on both. I don't know if we can build that into the RFP or not. By state, by state regulation.
It's something that I can definitely share
Look into that.
with Chief Gaven.
Yeah, that would be good, because I think that's something that we would, go ahead, Randy. You're more of an expert in this than I am.
Well, so thank you, Chair. I don't know if I'm more of an expert in it, but generally, call centers like this, they work because they're pulling in from multiple providers, and there's an economy of scale that slips in when you're trying to provide 24/7, 365 adequate coverage. It's more who's already doing the work. I mean, I always like to go local whenever we can as well. I mean, we support and pay wages and benefits to the people who live in our community. But it's, for something like this to work, it needs to be more than just Eugene Springfield Fire or even our surrounding jurisdictions.
It's about scale.
It's about scale.
Continue.
All right, moving on, and with all of these, I think that, prior to this meeting, these are just updates of like, okay, yeah, we got it over the finish line. Well, then there's the work begins. And so my sense is that over the course of the next year, there will be at different times updates to the full city council related to the implementation of some of these items as we're going through that. Or they will just be added on into the course of the regular programmatic updates that you receive related to the different topics we have. So, that there will be further kind of implementation focus. So, but number two, unhoused response funding. And so as we had identified a $7 million gap for the remaining biennium for the city of Eugene for shelter. And Senate Bill 1530 included $65 million for unhoused shelter statewide. We unsuccessfully advocated or sought a revision to the bill to expand the eligibility to include rest stops and RV camping sites such as 310 Garfield. We were unsuccessful. The governor's office was very clear that the governor did not want to amend the bill to include that. And I think it goes into a larger contextual piece that Mayor Venice has had a chance to engage with at the federal level, which is that a lot of the continuum of care and the housing investments from the federal and state level really adopt a housing first model. And the transitional housing or temporary shelters are not necessarily a policy priority and therefore not a funding priority. So that's an ongoing challenge and ongoing work that we do at both the federal level and the state level. And so that really came on out in the discussions and why there was not an interest to revise the bill and expand that eligibility. So we'll keep coming back to it. We had a lot of back and forth with the governor's office and her policy advisor related to housing and homelessness. And, I think that's something that during the interim between the next session, we want to spend more time on kind of advocating for Eugene's perspective on this and a lot of cities' perspective. So, but the bill included $65 million for operation services and administration of emergency shelters, project turnkey sites, and navigation centers. And so we will work with OHCS to access funding for our in-house programs. During the discussions, there was a lot of requests to have better clarity about how OHCS will administer the funds. And there was no commitment. There was just some statements to say, yes, OHCS will do better to communicate and better to engage. And so we're hoping that engage stakeholders and communities. And so we're hoping that will flow through into the implementation process.
So,
Mayor.
yeah, so it's just clarification, so whatever funding, so the OHCS funding that we might get is, are you saying within the context of that 65 million, or are you saying that's our ongoing conversation around the rest stops and 310 Garfield. I'm sort of lost on what funding are we talking about with OHCS in this sense?
So we've identified a $7 million gap.
Right,
OHCS now will receive $65 million. Part of that $7 million gap is eligible
okay,
for
okay,
the 65 million.
okay,
If we had been successful in expanding eligibility, all of that $7 million
Got it.
gap. So 310 Garfield, and so there's about $1 million gap that we've identified. That's not gonna be eligible for the 65 million.
okay,
And so, and so what we'll need to do is then our staff will be engaging in the OHCS process.
got it,
They haven't identified what the process is, and so
got
we
it.
just need to be heavily engaged.
So this was like what we went through with the all-in last year, where we had to try and figure out which of our emergency beds would qualify for some of that all-in funding, same kind of process. Yeah.
Yes, and what we have heard from OACS is that because there's a lot of feedback, say the MAC process didn't work for cities and for providers, and they said, yeah, we get that. That was a process that was set up under the emergency order and those emergency rules that were established. This funding is going back on into the agency's kind of ongoing programmatic response, and so it likely won't go to the max. We've said, they said, we're probably not gonna go to the max, we're gonna have more direct distribution to providers. And so our staff needs to be engaged. at this
Okay.
point, so.
Ethan, a quick note on that. If you remember, I guess this must be about 8 or 9 years ago now, when John Reese was the city manager, we adopted a housing first policy. Do we need to revisit that, you think, as a council? And perhaps make adjustments based on what's come out of the legislature now?
Chair Evans, my recollection on that is that it was a high-level policy statement that was adopted by the council. I could look into our documents to see where it lives. I think it's still in our documents. But since then, the TAC report was completed and the recommendations out of that's then helped to clarify how council and the city approached housing and shelter. And then the HIP has been adopted, housing implementation pipeline. So I think that those two, and then there's probably some other document that has come before council that I feel like has given us good enough direction to say, yes, we still support, City of Eugene supports the housing first model, and
Okay.
we believe that there needs to be investments in transitional housing, because the housing first model is great, it works, it's just, we've got 3,500 people living on the streets, and housing first isn't gonna get us 3,500 units overnight.
You wouldn't recommend us, having to realign, housing first with the changes that have come about in the last, few
Chair
years.
Evans, I think that from a policy standpoint, where we are at the state and the federal level, I think we're good. I think I would say if that's something that in future council work sessions related to unhoused and or housing policy, that it raises on up to be a barrier, I think then that conversation, but at this point, I don't see it. All right, move on. Okay, so and we'll come back to 1530 in just a little bit because there was some movement related to that. So housing infrastructure funding. And so Governor Kotek's Housing Bill 1537, it initially included funding for city infrastructure. That was then pulled on out, and then it was dumped into 1530. So 1537 became the policy vehicle. 1530 was the funding vehicle. And so in the policy vehicle, and this is something that in regards to follow-up, there will need to be follow-up related to the impacts to the city of Eugene's land use system and what we can expect to occur based out of 1537. And so just really quickly, you know, you've heard about this before, but the HAPO, the Housing Accountability and Production Office, that was authorized and funded. Requires local governments to grant land use regulation and design adjustments in certain circumstances and modifies the definition of limited land use decisions. So that will have impact on our land use policy, and there'll probably be code amendments related to that. Allows housing permit applications to opt into amended housing regulations and expands eligibility of prevailing applicants for housing development to receive attorney fees and the land use board appeals review. That was an area that was supported. Establishes the Housing Infrastructure Support Fund. That will become and support municipalities for the planning and financing of infrastructure for housing unit production. What's really important about that is it establishes a fund, and then the programmatics, or that kind of the sideboards of what a new program would look like are now established and implemented. And then successive legislatures can add funding, more funding, less funding into that, which then municipalities can access. For right now, I think they just put enough funding on it to set up the fund and to then also do some studies and some work on that. The housing project revolving loan fund to cover eligible developer costs, including infrastructure, SDCs, pre-development costs, construction costs, and land write-downs. We had a meeting during the session, and City of Eugene staff, and Davies, or excuse me, and Fifield and Amanda D'Souza. We met with Representative Pam Marsh and then Bill Van Vliet from the NOAA, who is one of the developer advocates for the bill. And we walked through how this housing infrastructure, the project revolving loan fund would work. And it became really clear that because Eugene, there's like a handful of communities statewide, Eugene, Portland being one other, that have adopted a multiple unit tax incentive, and ours is the MUPTI, up in Portland it's the multi. That because we have those set, other communities haven't adopted those. This is another option, and the thing is that you can pick one or the other. You can't have two ad valorem tax exemptions. And so we looked at these and we were like, well, at least on a project by project basis. And so we may set up a program, but we may just look at it and say, look, MUPTI is doing everything that this new project would do, and therefore we don't need to go through the process of setting up a whole new process program. And the way that this revolving loan fund is set on up is that it has a lot less local administration and authority. You have to go back to the state and back and forth, and so it's fairly clunky. And so while it is so they put $75 million into it, we'll see how many communities, and we'll have our staff dig on into it with the details. But from the initial piece, even the advocates and Rep Marsh were all like, yeah, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a fit for you all, but other communities across the state will. And then the last one is allows cities to undergo either a one-time UGB amendment or a land exchange in specified conditions. And we spent time looking at that, and basically we have a lot of available land within our UGB, and we would not be eligible for an expansion. The land that we have really, as we've said, needs to have infrastructure expansion to make it more cost-effective and feasible for development. So, but it is something that more than likely planning staff would want to come back and have a discussion with council on at some point.
So with the UGB piece, would that allow for more or less wetlands mitigation? Because a lot of what we have in the UGB right now, I mean, out in my ward, it's, wetlands. Which is one of the things we're planning for, but I mean, the trade-off is with our wetlands bank out in Dunedin.
Chair Evans, my sense, so if I get the question correct, let me see if this is what you're asking, is that if the city chose to utilize this one-time UGB expansion, would that be eligible for a wetlands exemption?
Yeah.
To that, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Because, there's some planning that we've had in the last year or so that you know, off of Barger and, why am I not thinking about, you know, the name?
Clear Lake,
Was that?
Clear Lake.
No, the road that goes out to the,
Green Hill?
Green Hill, yeah. That Green Hill Barger area is one of the areas in going north that has been identified in our 2037 plan for residential development. But there needs to be a certain amount of wetlands mitigation to make that work.
Yeah, and I think that what our position continues to be is that it's one thing to expand the UGB, it's another thing to actually make it usable.
Yeah.
And affordable. And so I'll use Crow Road as an example. Crow Road has got infrastructure needs, and wetland mitigation would be included in kind of the needs to make it developable, right? So looking at the future, we would want to say, state, can you help us make these lands more readily available at a lower cost for development? And that therefore we would do the mitigation upfront. You know, it's just trying to do pre-development work to get more units into the pipeline. Well, that just
Make it
takes,
attractive.
takes
for
money.
private development.
yeah, it takes money. And so whether the council provides that, or if it's a local improvement district, or if the state comes in and provides direct funding, which is what we're successful with this year. Okay, so just moving in, that's a great segue. So moving forward, 1530, and as I said, that was the funding bill. It was amended to include several applications, including $6 million to the city of Eugene for water and sewer infrastructure improvements on Crow Road. I mean, this is pretty massive. Like Portland received probably double this because they've got a lot of big projects that they're working on. There was other communities that received lesser amounts. In Eugene, we received, and so that's something that advocacy made it clear that this was a priority for a couple of years, and then our legislators really carried this home. So if you want to run into one, yes, give them pats on the back, because this is a big one.
Right, and that was Holby's committee.
It was, but I think it was close the story. I think it was a delegation decision, and it is in Representative Fahey, House Majority Fahey,
Right.
per district. And so I think that there was support across the board for that. But then, and then turning on to the second page, there's 2 million. So these are state programs. So there's $2 million to provide support for warming and cooling emergency shelters for facilities, 4 million for deposit into the residential heat pump fund, 15 million for deposit into the Healthy Homes Repair Fund. And so those are all programs that either the city of Eugene, EWEB, Homes for Good, Lane County, all will be able to access and advance housing and climate priorities. And so I think that that's good to know that these are additional investments on top of what was invested at the beginning of when they wrote the biennial budget last year. Questions on that? Okay, and then support increased state investment in mental health and behavioral health systems. And so the vehicle for investments in this was the House Bill 4002 related to and then there was a companion funding bill related to that, but it was really the Measure 110 reform. So the conversation was a lot of recriminalization of drug possession offenses and also treatment. And so they were needed to go hand in hand to get a negotiated, settlement of as many parties as possible. And it was bipartisan. It came out of the House and the Senate, bipartisan support. And so funding wise, in terms of what is coming to Eugene and our area and the state, there's a whole list of items here. Specifically, there's 4 million to Willamette Family Incorporated to support the construction of the Willamette Family Medical Detox and Residential Services Facility, which we assume to be here in Eugene or within the metro area. Lane County was not successful in securing funding for the stabilization center.
Oh,
So that was, and that would have been in here. It was on the list, but then it got pulled off the list. So
Right.
Do you know what it costs now?
Golly.
I think that I think that there was confusion as to the need of funding. And whereas our requests are very crystal clear. We get the money, we do this. We don't get the money, we don't do this. I think that there was confusion within the way that the advocacy was happening within that. So,
It seems to me that that was right on track to do exactly what they're trying to do.
no,
That is a bummer.
no. And then additionally, there's all of this other money, which, this is one of the things why, I think that having a follow-up with council, with Chief Skinner, potentially Judge Gill, or Administrator Sarah, sorry, trying to blank on his name, to come in and talk about like, yeah, these are all funds that went to the state different criminal justice programs and see how they might flow through to our criminal justice treatment system and programs here locally. So Caligar, Court Administrator Sarah Caligar. And so I just wanted to outline those just to show that, and I know council at different times has said, when we're dealing with the unhoused issues, how do we move upstream to really work on the mental health, behavioral health, and treatment and addiction? Well, these are state really stepped forward and made pretty substantial investments this year, so. And then moving forward, additional regional funding highlights. So on the kind of quote unquote, the Christmas tree bill, it's the end of session budget bill. There was a bunch of add-ons in there. And this is a list of them. So $5 million to Civic Alliance, ostensibly for the completion of the Civic Stadium, 300,000 to Very Little Theater for capital improvements, 900,000 to Lane County for emergency communications equipment, $2 million for construction to the U of O for construction of the semiconductor workforce training space, 1.5 to Homes for Good for the Ollie Court Affordable Housing Project, and then 7.5 million in Lane County for the multi-use facility at the fairgrounds. The aspect of that is that it is contingent last money in. So the state said in that allocation, they said the 7.5 will be available if all of the other funding is secured and the project's moving forward. So. And then just lastly is the policy bills. There was a number of different policy bills that passed that will have some impact on Eugene. That there was a duty to defend, which has to get into risk and insurance coverages through procurement processes, which we'll want to spend time on understanding. And so more than likely within the next couple of months, we'll come back to IGR and also just have probably an update memo to council that says, here's a bunch of new laws that passed the impacts to Eugene and the community. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. What happened with Hillsborough's request? They had a similar request to Lane County for funding for their stadium.
They received 15 million. I don't know if it had the contingent part on it. I can take a look at that. But I don't
I
know.
talked to Mayor Callaway this morning. He's in DC. He's very happy.
Yeah, so they received in the same allocation 15 million.
So both projects received 15 million in total. Or they
No,
received 15 on top of what they,
and we get 7.5.
7.5, but on top of 7.5 that was already committed for 15. Did the Hops have a similar ask and receive?
So the seven, so just for clarification, Councilor Gross, so I think at the beginning of the biennium, there was 7.5 allocated from the state to Lane County. This short session, there was an additional 7.5.
Yes.
So that is a total of 15 for the multi-use facility. Related to the Hops, I don't believe that they had an ask, but I don't believe they got money from the legislature during the beginning of the biennium. And now they've got a $15 million allocation.
So there's parity there.
I believe so, although I could be completely wrong on that, and there could have been an allocation by the state earlier on related to the Hops.
I was just curious how that worked out. Again, it's a Lane County project, not a City of Eugene project, but, just trying to understand.
Yeah. They're not apples to apples. They're one's an orange and one's an apple related to ownership, size, bunch of other stuff. So,
Jurisdiction,
yeah.
because theirs is a city project, ours is a county.
And they're gonna modify an existing facility, not build new. Correct?
I believe that they were gonna build new.
Are they?
Hops, yeah. But again. I'm going off, so.
I heard the same thing you did, that they were modifying, but maybe that was an earlier plan. Things change.
I think they're building new. I think they're building new, because I think it's well over $100 million that they're putting into that.
Yeah, I'd heard 120.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, 120, 125 million.
Okay. Just want to know where we stand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or what's next on our list, Ethan?
Story.
Are we about ready for items from the committee?
Nope, we're gonna move on in. So if there's no more questions on this, on the number 3, I'll move to the number 4, United Front trip update.
I just wanted, but I just do want to chime in that this is a successful report. This was like pretty great. Thank you for all the work you did to make this as great as it is. I mean, that was so discouraging last year, and this is really great this year, right? So
You bet.
we really got our 3 big asks, we really got them, and it's very promising. And with the unhoused, we're teed up for 2025, hopefully to do more. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I want to
Thank you.
thank my appreciation as well. And I also want to thank our state legislative representative.
Yeah.
Here locally, they did a very good job. I'm sure it wasn't an easy process. Everything is condensed in a short session like that. And I think there's clearly some things that are going to help us provide better service. So thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. I mean, you did a great job, and our legislative delegation came through for us. So tell us what the United Front's gonna look like.
Can do, and I appreciate the support. I'd also just be remiss if I didn't recognize that folks like Cherish, all of our staff across the organization, councils, continued focus on priorities and clarity on working through a strategic plan, our leadership consistently working through good communications and finalizing where our position is with our partners. All of that, and then our delegation. We spent a lot of time working with the delegation, and I'd say we all engaged, speaking about with clarity of here's what really matters to Eugene, and having those priorities. We got skunked last year, right? And then we got to win this year, and so it's always like what do we do, right? What do we do right? What do we do wrong? And so I think it's just the learning for me is that as we continue on, it's the continual clarity on purpose, being able to have those conversations on an ongoing basis and show the value to the community. And this was one of the sessions where the city council, the state legislature, they had aligned priorities, and there was also a lot of additional funding available at the state that had not been. The new revenue forecasts were showing that there is surplus, and so that's also a huge benefit. And so just kind of keep that in mind as we look to how we move forward on this stuff.
Yeah, great.
Okay, United Front trip. This is, I just give this to you. We don't have to go through it line by line, but as you can see, we will be Mayor Venus, myself, and Fire Chief Caden will be attending. And it's the traditional trip, March 18th, 19th, and 20th. And we've got meetings across the board from FCC staff and the chairman Rosenworcel to advocate for our federal telecom policy positions, to meetings with staff from our delegation, to meeting with the delegation members themselves, to other entities. And there's we have a new addition this year with 4J joining the United Front, and so our community will be better represented from the educational standpoint, I think, than we have in the past. And kind of just wanted to give you this outline of where we are right now, what's been scheduled, and then what we hope to get scheduled, and we're waiting for pending meetings. And it always comes down to kind of the last couple of days, right before the delegation starts, is then what will be finalized. But if there's any questions on this, we can dive on into it, but I want to provide this to you just so you get a sense of what we'll be up to.
Anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? Counselor, Mayor?
Well, I guess I have a question from Matt, actually, who just asked in our leadership meeting, what might come to council? I know we have the usual, chair usually does a report. I don't know whether you're planning to come back to council with a more in-depth summary.
Yeah, and I shared it to, for everyone, Mayor Venus, was referencing, Councilor Keating had mentioned that, having me come and give a IGR update to council. And, I think what we'll provide is some trip notes from what this was for you to share on Monday. And then I've asked Sarah, to say, what do you need from me? And so, I follow obviously her direction as to how she wants to put forth items on the agenda. And but I think that, as I shared previously, I think that there's a lot here policy-wise, especially related to the recriminalization and the treatment funding and the land use items that will take our staff and leadership a little bit of time to like sink in, figure on out, okay, how do we implement? A lot of these are just laws that were passed that then the OARs, the administrative rules, need to be written. And so we don't really necessarily know how everything's gonna flesh out. So I think that in the next, 3 to 6 months, there will be time where come back to council, schedule things to be able to say, here's what you as counselors need to know about what we're thinking. I think right now, this level of, and being able to provide Chair Evans with the quick notes on it should suffice to the level that, council's pretty busy right now.
So if I'm just thinking kind of, out loud here. So we're running up against a budget cliff as far as, what we're going to be facing over the next few months in the year, with a significant hole in our budget. And then with, the recriminalization being passed, what resources are we going to need to put to public safety to be able to, kind of address that gap? I mean, all I see is the gap getting bigger.
Yeah, Chair Evans, I would just defer to Chief Skinner and Sarah and Twyla. This is just stuff that gets plugged on into that broader calculus of budgetary discussions.
Right. My assumption based on this is that we're gonna need more police, and we're having a tough enough time getting police as it is. It's gonna be one of the additional challenges we're gonna have to meet.
I think one of the things that would be beneficial is to help have Chief Skinner come and talk about what's in the news versus what the reality for EPD to be able to deliver on, so that council and the community get a good sense that, I think that there's a sense that 4002 passed, Measure 110 is reformed, and now everything's okay. There's a lot of moving pieces in there, and just to set expectations, and that's why I think it would be more beneficial that there's a policy discussion and a budgetary discussion that leadership will we'll bring back to council and council determines that's what you talk about.
So I've gotta think that there's gonna be some significant financial impact that we're gonna have to deal with, you know, from an enforcement perspective. Or, you know, that will also include municipal court. Possible, right?
Again, I'll defer to Sarah, the chief.
That's more than
We'll
one.
cross that bridge when we come to it, kind of deal.
It is interesting, but the county did get a lot, I mean, the county's been worried about the public defenders being able to cope with this, and they did get some significant funding this year, so the legislature heard that concern, it looks like, so that's gonna make a difference. Enough of a difference, I don't know. But
Anything else for the good of the order?
Oh, I got one thing. So as you've heard, or hopefully you've heard, is that Representative Colby announced his retirement. And much like when Congressman DeFazio retired, we supported a retirement celebration. And so I'm working with the representative staff and others to figure out what that would look like.
Nice.
And more than likely it'll be in April, and we'll kind of support and invite to ensure that folks, and there will more than likely be speaking opportunities to recognize his 22 years on the House.
Pretty amazing.
And so I'll just kind of put that out there as a marker for something in April.
Very cool.
A lot of elections.
That's a lot, many of us, yeah, it's a lot of time to serve. Something. Cool, good. That's great.
Well, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I declare this adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.